Hey folks, how's it going? Dr. Spin. Eclectic album reviews and general musical meanderings. Another roundup post for you I got for the month of July. 6 albums, just kind of superficial first impressions on these releases. A lot of great music on this post, so kind of keep your eyes peeled for new stuff to follow. First one up is Mammoth WVH's debut album. And this is the first album from Wolfgang Van Halen as a solo artist. And of course, Wolfgang Van Halen is the son of Eddie Van Halen. This album has gotten a lot of press. There's a lot of anticipation behind it. And I'm really happy to say that it is a pretty incredible album. Anybody who I've played it for are just like, okay, man, I like all these songs. There's really not a dud song of the bunch. And what's really respectable about this is that even though this is a really great hard rock album, it in no way is really trying to copy what his father did. If anything, if any part of the Van Halen legacy Wolfgang is trying to copy here, it's sort of Eddie Van Halen's later period when he was really getting into songwriting, and much less so his sort of pyrotechnic guitar antics, for sure. And Wolfgang Van Halen plays all the instruments on this album, guitar, bass. He's a great drummer, some phenomenal drum work on there, and vocals, great singer, and the production. So he's meeting the 21st century idea of what a solo musician has to be. It's not enough now just to be a great guitar player or a great bass player, a great pianist, or even a great songwriter. You have to be a producer, you have to be a multi-instrumentalist, all these things. And Wolfgang Van Halen is doing extremely well on this album. And for me, so much of the appreciation I have from an album is the context that I find it in. And I gotta say that just thinking about Wolfgang Van Halen making this album in light of his father's passing and in light of the very strong bond that he and his father shared is really moving. It gives this album a sense of gravity and a sense of sincerity that I think will carry it as an album very far. And I think also Wolfgang Van Halen very far in the future. He's a really, really phenomenal talent who's not just gotten talent, but has nurtured it. And not just nurtured it by being, the bass player for Van Halen in his teens, but also because of his not just his dedication to his father, but also because of his father's dedication to him. And that shows through in this music. So a very highly suggested release. Okay, next up is Clipping's first debut album, Clipping. That's just the word clipping without the vowels, and I don't know how you're supposed to actually say that. Clipping is a hip-hop group and kind of an avant-garde experimental hip-hop group. Although I think that they would fight against that idea. Really what they're trying to do is try to make kind of noisy hip-hop in the style of like early Public Enemy and the Bomb Squad, that sort of thing. And I kind of latched onto them because they reminded me a little bit of Death Grips, that level of intensity and that kind of aesthetic.
And that big block engine turning over into Caprice that's peeling out of the driveway, letting the tires scream. Storm coming. Everybody inside. It's a war coming. Stack your bread, get high, gotta pour some. Out for the homies. Turn that beat up. Get loaded. It's a murder on the outside. Everybody inside. Murder on the outside. Everybody inside. Murder on the outside. Everybody inside. Inside out now. Lock and load. That's right. Orange cones and yellow tape. Palm trees swaying passers by. All of the other.
Now I'm real picky about my hip hop and my rap music, and sometimes I can't even tell you what it is I like about a rap band that allows me to connect with them. But there's been a stylistic shift recently in a lot of rap and hip hop where rappers will rap sort of disengaged from the beat. I mean, it'll still fit within the phrasing of the piece, but still they're kind of, don't really pay as much attention to really digging into the beat. This is what Clipping does really, really well. The vocalist in this group digs into subdivisions and digs into the rhythm and gets so much emotional intensity out of just playing things right in the pocket. I can definitely tell you that's one of the things that I love about this album. Also, the wide variety of sounds that they use for their samples and the backgrounds. It's not just beats. There's a lot of other things going on here that are worth talking about in the long term. Okay, next up is Floating Points, Pharoah Sanders, and the London Symphony Orchestra. The album promises. Now, Floating Points is a really like a benchmark 2020 album for me. And the comment that I had about that album was I felt like Floating Points was trying to take electronic music and move it a little bit out of the dance EDM background that he had and more into almost like a classical, chamber style. And that clearly has come into fruition because this album is a very, very interesting crossover between electronic music and jazz and orchestral styles. Now, Promises is meant to be digested in one whole thing. There are 9 movements to the piece, as it were. And it has this really great sort of very minimalist melody that you probably heard in that sample there that kind of persists throughout the piece. And it really gives it a sense like it's almost like it's breathing. The meditative quality of Promises comes from that melodic line just being repeated over and over at very regular intervals, but in a very relaxed and laid-back sense. And some of these movements focus more on Pharoah Sanders' saxophone improvisations. Some of them are just all full-on orchestral pieces that are performed. My understanding is that Floating Points made all these arrangements, and if that's the case, it's his talent just seems to know no boundaries at this point. I'm completely impressed with everything he's ever done. If there's anybody out there who's really like a Renaissance polymath style musician, it's the guy from Floating Points. Absolutely impressive album and an amazing piece of work. Next up is Gunship's self-titled debut from 2015. Gunship is, if you could probably tell by the cover, sort of a dark synthwave band. They really mine the nostalgic qualities of 80s music. But they're one of the ones that's really unique because they're kind of taking a different spin on it. Again, like many synthwave artists who really try to go for that memories of VHS feel in their music. They're actually kind of a little bit more of a dark and almost gothic overtone to their music. And as you probably figured, the thing that really makes this album work is fantastic songwriting. The songs are very well arranged, they're played really well. Everything is crafted in a way meant to evoke a certain time period, a certain style of music, but it's also one of those situations where tell me exactly what 80s group Gunship sounds like. You'll be challenged to figure out what's going on with that because they're looking at this whole 80s sound in terms of its nostalgia and not just its content. And as a side note, I'm growing increasingly curious about the use of this sort of sun graphic in a lot of synthwave bands. We saw this at FM84 a couple of years ago, and continually I see this sort of digital sunrise artwork being used, and I'm wondering what the origins of that are. It feels like there's some sort of subtext there that maybe I'm missing, but that's something I'm finding myself increasingly interested in looking at. Okay, next up is Frank Zappa's You Can't Do That on Stage Anymore, Volume 6. This is the last installment in Frank Zappa's You Can't Do That on Stage Anymore series. Now, I've been listening to these every 6 months for the past 3 years now. And so this is the last one. And it's one that I actually, especially now that I've been listening to it a little bit more, I do have some familiarity with. I listened to this one when I was taking a Frank Zappa class back in the day, and I haven't listened to it very much since then. But as I've gone back into it, this was a pretty influential recording for me at the time I was listening to it. And a lot of my frustrations that I've had with the Frank Zappa You Can't Do That on Stage Anymore series, not living up to the standard that was set by Volume 1, was also kind of predicated on the standards set by Volume 6, because Volume 6 and Volume 1 are very similar in the way that they present this narrative that Frank Zappa is putting forward. This particular recording feels like a 2-hour concert by Frank Zappa that's spliced together with the various incarnations of his band having a dialogue with one another, talking through it. And so my perception of this whole series was actually kind of set a little bit by my experience with this album. A lot of the 70s groups are on this one. Very exciting, and this because that's my favorite era of Frank Zappa's rock work, at least. So I'm pretty pumped about this one and getting a chance to really take a super close look at it over the next 6 months or so, and then wrapping up that series in December. Okay, my very last one is Antiphon by Midlake. Midlake is a Denton band, local hometown band. And this is the first album they had after their lead singer, Tim Smith, had left the band. Quite famously, I listened to Tales of Occupanther a couple of years ago, and that was an album that I really connected with. I really enjoyed its I guess I call it the sense that incarnation was the band was the agrarian Radiohead. Certainly this version of the band, without Tim Smith on lead, with Pulido singing lead, is not quite as vivid as Tales from Occupanther is, and in some ways not quite as succinct. It's leans a little bit more on the progressive side of this progressive folk thing that Midlake has going on. But still, it's a great listen. There's a lot of really great musicianship and a lot of great songwriting on this one.
Building our own with those who join us. Celebration. Oh, this day will never come.
That particular song, Aurora Gone, is one that kind of most easily relates back to the Tim Smith era. It feels the most like the styles that was going forth on Tales of Occupanther. But that clip I really feel like I need to put up, because if it didn't get blocked, the video for that song features the members of the band just kind of running around Denton and doing Denton things. And if you're a person who's from Denton, it's really easy to lock in with that. I mean, I used to run around the streets in Denton running, and just feels like it's me doing those things, because I've spent nearly coming up on probably 25 years in Denton in various stages, and 20 years in one, then most recently another 5-year stay. But things are changing for me right now. I'm in the process of moving away from Denton and from Texas altogether. So that means my background and my environment's going to change. We're about to start doing some work on that house, just so I can save you the grief of watching all that happen. Oh, yeah. I may be doing some of these posts from inside closets or in weird hallways, and I don't really want you to see all that necessarily, but I do want to be able to continue to bring you these reviews and talk to you about music, because it's important to me, and I really enjoy doing it, and I enjoy the dialogue, and I enjoy getting to spread the word on music that I feel passionate about. So I'm willing to go through the trouble of lugging this stuff around and kind of doing this on the road for the next few months. Now, you'll have to forgive me if I miss some here and there, but I'm going to really try to keep with my weekly schedule. So if you want to know when those posts are going to happen, please make sure you like and subscribe and share them out with your friends. Of course, follow me over on Spotify. I'm going to be putting tracks up from this month's roundup on my 2021 playlist. And I will see you again next time. Until then, I'll catch you on the flip side.